Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the third Spider-Verse miniseries as we take a look at Spider-Verse Volume 3, Number 4. So, once again, as promised on Tuesday, today's universe of visitation is the world of Ponderosa Parker, aka the Web Slinger, and the story actually begins with him essentially breaking up a train heist. Basically, in this reality, Kraven the Hunter, instead of being a big game hunter from Russia, is just basically your average everyday outlaw, which I only really know he's Kraven because one, he has a big bushy beard, and at one point the web slayer calls him a Kraven. So, I guess it's Kraven. Either way, he and his men are robbing a train, and the web slinger is there to do something about it. Utilizing his, web slingers, which are of course his guns, he's able to jam all the weapons of the rest of Kraven's men and then whoop their asses, but Kraven ends up manages to get to the front of the train and holds the conductor at gunpoint. As such, the web slinger pretty much just tells Kraven this can go one of two ways. He either shoots him with one gun or he shoots him with the other, and Kraven's response is just throw the train conductor of the web slinger and then jump off the train, which gives him a good escape plan. Though he does tumble a bit as he flies off because the train was on a mountain. And unfortunately, though, it turns out Kraven did kind of plan for an escape because on the track is a bunch of dynamite. As such, to save the conductor, the web slinger throws him out and manages to web him to a tree, and he manages to get clear of the train before just as it hits all the dynamite and explodes. But unfortunately for the web slinger, his guns are out of ammo, so he can't swing away, and as a result, he ends up falling. And when the train exploded, there actually was a river below, so he ends up falling in, and the train ends up following after. Thankfully, he's unharmed, though a bit waterlogged, and he manages to crawl his way out of the river and catch his breath on a nearby and manages to catch his breath. However, just as he's lying there, he ends up getting a visitor, and that visitor is, of course, Miles Morales, he is wearing a sombrero and a poncho over his spider suit. Have I mentioned I love comics yet? But basically, yeah, Miles is here in this reality to essentially offer the web slinger assistance, and the web slinger just turns Miles away. Basically, while he does recognize Miles from the previous Spider-Verse themed events, especially since Miles is one of the Spideys that recruited him for Spider-Verse, well, he's not interested. He basically doesn't want Miles' help. For one thing, he thinks he sticks out like a sore thumb, and two, considering the time period, he doesn't think someone of Miles's complexion would be universally accepted, which even Miles takes some offense to, which I don't blame him. Though, of course, we don't see him out of his costume very often, so I guess you really have to be looking to see if he was African American or not, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, though, that he doesn't want Miles there, but Miles also refuses to leave because, well, he's still looking for Annie Mae Parker, and he is jumping from universe to universe, just offering assistance where he can, so he's refusing to leave the web slinger alone. And as such, the web slinger just kind of deals with him. As such, after calling his horse, we learn more about his horse. Apparently, the horse is also bitten by the same spider that bit him, so he and the horse are somewhat connected by a rider sense, and we even get a little joke about why the horse is wearing a mask at all. But basically, Miles and the web slinger just kind of hit the dusty trails until eventually night comes, and the two of them sit down to just get some food in their bellies. As such, Miles and the web slinger do end up talking, and the web slinger and basically they just kind of talk, and basically Miles is marveling at the beautiful night sky because, well, he's from New York and he doesn't see this very often, and they are talking about their different lifestyles since when night comes in New York things get more hectic, while here on the plains night is a lot more peaceful. But the conversation even shifts to, well, the web slinger himself, as Miles starts asking, I never really got your name, and the web slinger just says, I'm Ponderosa Parker, alias the web slinger. But which Miles is a little dubious about his name Ponderosa. There's no way that he can that's his real name. However, Ponderosa Parker is obviously very secretive of his identity, since he's a superhero and he has a long list of enemies, and if anyone learned what his real name was, then odds are people he cared about would have a target on their back, so he doesn't like his real name getting out there. So he introduces himself to people, it's either as Ponderosa Parker or the web slinger, no in between, which Miles does understand. However, as they're having this conversation, they end up hearing some tussling a little bit behind them, and so Miles and the web slinger get into combat positions, until they see that the woman that's coming through is essentially a young Mexican girl. Basically after Miles and the web slinger realize she's not a threat, they bring her over to their campsite, and she doesn't speak English, but since Miles is half Latino, he does speak Spanish, and he's able to understand her. Essentially, she reveals that she's from a village due east, and well, the village has been attacked by bandits. Basically, the bandits have been ravaging the village and pillaging whatever they could, and have been pretty much forcing the townspeople to pay them to leave them alone. And if the townspeople don't have any chances of paying up, then the bandits end up taking their women. And basically, this girl has pretty much abandoned her village and been walking for 5 days just to find help, which is what eventually led her to the pair of Spideys here. Of course, Miles says we're going to help them, right? And, well, the web slinger doesn't even need to answer as he spits into what's left of their campfire to put it out, and Miles, and the girl end up making their way to the village, with the girl giving more details about the bandits and revealing that their leader is a big burly guy who kills people with a chain. His alias, El Escorpion, or, in English, the Scorpion. Which, yeah, again, I'm loving that we're seeing more alternate versions of Spider-Man villains here. Pretty much, but either way, the pair of Spideys and the girl do manage to make it back to their village, or make it back to her village, but unfortunately they arrive just as the Scorpion and his bandits arrive. As such, it becomes a matter of divide and conquer. The web slinger ends up sending Miles off on his horse and tells them, bring her back to the village. While Miles isn't exactly willing to abandon the web slinger in the middle of a fight, the web slinger tells him, I gotta hold these guys off as best as I can, and if I can't do it, then you're the last line of defense, and you gotta defend the village. And as such, while Miles is reluctant, he does comply, and he does take the girl back to the village. As such, the web slinger is able to thankfully throw the bandits off, as using his web slinging guns, he's able to create a web line that between a rock and a cactus that ends up tripping up the horses of the Scorpion and his men, causing them all to just tumble over themselves. And in the confusion, the web slinger ends up jumping right onto one of their horses, and then rides off, pretty much just hooting and hollering and getting their attention. Now, the Scorpion sees this and gets pissed, and basically, from what I can tell, he orders his men to go after the web slinger, but just as they're about to cross a river, it gets electrified. How? By Miles, who decided to offer some assistance anyway, as he uses Venom Blast to electrify the water and fend them off. And these guys, being a superstitious, cowardly lot, decide, you know what? Fuck this ain't worth it, and they just run off, leaving Miles behind, calling him the Black Ghost. Miles doesn't completely hate it. But either way, the only one that's left standing is the Scorpion, who basically just calls the web slinger out. And the web slinger just pretty much taunts him because he says, yeah, you don't need to shout, him right here. And so basically, the two of them get into a little standoff before they engage in combat, with the Scorpion taking out his chain and swinging at the web slinger, who's able to dodge it effectively and tries shooting at him with his guns. Unfortunately, though, in the battle, the Scorpion's chain manages to nick the web slinger and cut into his arm. And essentially, the Scorpion tells the web slinger that that's a death sentence. That what's going on is that he is now injected in with a special kind of poison that, if it's not sucked out of his body within 24 hours, it will kill him. However, as the Scorpion is essentially bragging about this, basically the web slinger just kind of starts chuckling, and the Scorpion wonders what he's chuckling about, and he says, "It tingles." It's like, what? The poison? It's like, no, my rider sense. At which point, the web slinger's horse comes out of nowhere, and then just bucks the Scorpion right in his back, taking him down. And as such, the day is saved. Miles is able to come up, and thankfully he's able to suck the poison right out of the web slinger's arm and save his life, though he's still kind of beaten up. But either way, the web slinger is thankful for the assistance, as he and Miles have now successfully saved this village, and as a show of appreciation, he ends up revealing his real name to Miles, and that name is Patrick O'Hara. Although no sooner does he give Miles that name, that Miles is whisked away to go to some other random parallel universe. But the comic ends with the people of the village celebrating and tending to the web slinger's wounds, as he talks about maybe it isn't a bad thing to sometimes get some help. And it's probably comforting to know that there are other people like him out there, so that's nice. But of course, this is still a Spider-Verse comic in this miniseries, so there are still some fan-submitted Spideys in the back of the book. The first is a spider by the name of Ren, whose main gimmick is that while she has the standard spider powers, she's a Canadian living in Japan who also has the power to manipulate emotions, which I think is creative, and I like her costume here. It's actually, look at it, it's just very flashy. very flashy, kind of fashion-oriented. Then, of course, after that, we have a web slinger known as the Spinner, who basically is a textile artist living in New York who got her spider powers from the goddess Athena, giving her some slight clairvoyance and the ability to literally weave light itself, which that kicks all the ass. And finally, our last spider sona, Hollow. His main gimmick is that he operates out of Salem, Massachusetts, and has a thing for the occult. Otherwise, his spider powers are the standard spider array. His design alone makes him my favorite. Oh, I don't care. Out of the 3 Spideys here, Hollow is my favorite. His spider mask is a pumpkin for a head. He has a hood with a spider thing on, with a spider motif on it. I don't care. He wins. He wins everything. Of course, the other Spideys are cool too. Ran again is really nice. Love her design. It's a unique idea to have her be able to manipulate emotions. And Spinner is really cool because I like her motif. I like how she has a black costume that kind of looks like a hood with light webs surrounding it. And the ability to weave light and have clairvoyance is cool. So she's a creative spider person. But again, Hollow wins. I don't care. He may not be, even if he's not objectively the best, his design alone makes me love him. He's my favorite spider person of this trio. So there you go. So, but yeah. That was issue 4. My thoughts on it, again, it's a fun ride. What I do like is that, much like with Penny Parker or Hobie Brown or any other Spideys that tend to get revisited in these comics, I like that we see more progression of the web-slinger story with each subsequent appearance. After all, in the beginning, he was essentially a joke Spider-Man. Because again, his whole gimmick was that he was a gun-slinging Western Spider-Man. So, and again, just in the context that he was introduced in, as he was one of the Spideys that Miles and the Drake Bell Spider-Man were recruiting during the events of Spider-Verse, he was just there to just kind of be in a background shot. Just be one of the Spideys that was there. Just be one of the Spideys that was introduced in Spider-Verse that wouldn't really have any expansion on them. And yet, in subsequent Spider-Verse related events, we've seen his story get expanded on, and I like that. At its core, the web-slinger's story is a Western tale with being filtered through the lens of the Spider-Man story. And I dig that. I think it really works given the context. As essentially all of his stories are just what you would expect from a standard Western story, just with some more supernatural comic book elements thrown in. Because after all, I can't think of many gunslingers who have the ability to crawl up to cling to walls and who shoot webs out of their guns. Which, yeah, even the comics themselves don't totally take themselves seriously. As again, you gotta remember, this is a Western Spider-Man. That concept alone sounds stupid. But I will, at the very least, they clearly try to have fun with it while still sticking to a lot of the standard Western cowboy tropes, which I think genuinely work in that regard, as it allows you to still have fun with the story while taking itself seriously enough that you can at least feel grounded in the story, that you can at least care about what's going on with the main character and the journeys and adventures he's going on. And this comic in itself continues that as we actually do get more into the web slinger and how he typically operates as the web slinger, especially since we also get a little snippet of his backstory. And yes, he had his own Uncle Ben. Kinda, sorta. It wasn't his uncle that died, but basically it's implied that his Uncle Ben tragedy that kind of helped define him was when he killed someone he considered a brother, or who was his actual brother. I don't know. It can be a little open to interpretation because they never expand more on it. But point is, they showcase that apparently during the Civil War, well, the web slinger was in the Union Army, and his either biological or metaphorical brother was a Confederate soldier, and Ben wound up, and essentially Patrick O'Hara killed him in action, and, well, that death has haunted him ever since. Yeah, they were fighting on opposite sides, but this was still someone he was close to, whether by blood or via emotional relationship. Either way, this was someone important to him, and his death is on Patrick's Patrick hands, so it would make sense why he would want to essentially run away from that. It would probably explain why he went to go join Dr. Morbius's traveling show for his tonic, because at that point he wanted to get away from all that stuff, and he used his gunslinging skills to essentially make a name for himself, which is what eventually, and of course, since he was traveling with Dr. Morbius, that's what led him getting bit by the spider, and you know the rest. My point is this: you can kind of just from that little snippet, you can kind of understand why this version of Spider-Man is the way he is. That, like with most other Spideys in the multiverse, what led him to becoming a hero was a tragedy that he had a hand in. Only in this case, this was something that he felt that he was directly responsible for, as it was implied that he was the one that killed his well, either friend or literal brother. They don't expand on it. The point is that death essentially it haunted him, and it can kind of explain why why he feels morally responsible to do the things he does. As even in the story, he says he doesn't really need to be involved in all this stuff, but it wouldn't feel right for him to just sit back and do nothing. So I do like that. It does actually expand more on the character, and I like kind of seeing him try to be a lone wolf throughout the story, but eventually realizing maybe it's not a bad idea to share the burden every once in a while, which I do like. But on top of that, I do like seeing his universe continually be expanded on. Of course, we got the beginning with him chasing after this world's Kraven the Hunter as he and his men were trying to rob a train, but I also liked seeing this world's version of the Scorpion, which I think it's actually a very creative gimmick that they do with him, as rather than being a guy in a full-on Scorpion suit, he's just a very strong bandit who took the Scorpion motif and just kind of ran with it, having a scorpion tattooed onto his chest, carrying around a large chain that when he stashes people with it poisons them, much like his standard scorpion tail. And it's pretty nice stuff. It's pretty nice stuff. And I like that, and as a result, it actually does offer still some creative solutions. And again, of course, the action is still kick-ass. This story still remembers it's a superhero Spider-Man story, and so we do get some genuinely kick-ass action with the web-slinger, Miles, and the various villains they face throughout the story. When the web-slinger confronts Kraven and his men on the train, it's again a high-flying, gun-toting adventure that has fun with what it is, because again, this is a Western version of Spider-Man whose guns shoot webs, so again, it's silly but still fun. And then likewise, seeing Miles and Patrick essentially working together to take down the Scorpion and his men is fun, as we see them use some actually kind of funny antics to take his men down, as the web slinger shoots a web line to trip up their horses, and to keep the Scorpion's men from offering him assistance, Miles essentially scares them off utilizing his venom blast in combination with a nearby river, essentially making them freak out and run away. I like that. It's smart, and while the comic doesn't take itself too seriously, as at the end of the day, it still remembers that this is meant to be like a Western version of Spider-Man, there's still enough there that you can take the story seriously, and it all really has to do with Patrick and his character arc throughout the comic. As again, like I said, he tried being a lone wolf and was still closed off that when Miles asked for his name, all he gave Miles were his aliases, Ponderosa Parker and the Web Slinger. Basically, in which he does give a valid reason for why he wouldn't reveal his real name, because, he's got a long list of enemies that he doesn't want getting that knowledge. But by the end, I do like that he comes to appreciate having Miles there at all, as he and Miles managed to work together rather well, and ultimately, whether he liked it or not, Miles that kind of helped him in the end, as while he did take down the Scorpion, he still got nicked with poison, and Miles was there to help him out. And he did consider Miles' assistance to be invaluable, as Miles did fend off the rest of the Scorpion's gang and did help him save his village. So I do like that by the end he's like, maybe it isn't a bad idea to get some help sometimes. So I dig that. It's nice. And kind of a nice little fun thing, I like that the web slinger's real name is Patrick O'Hara, as essentially revealing that has showcased that the web slinger is a proxy to not only Peter Parker, but also Miguel O'Hara, the Spider-Man of 2099. I don't know why, but I dig that. I really do dig that. Because here's the thing, when it comes to alternate versions of Miguel O'Hara, they all tend to just be different versions of Miguel O'Hara, all really fitting into the same standard story that you would expect for Spider-Man 2099. And as a result, any variations on the story just take Miguel O'Hara and put him in a different setting. There was one where he just got sent to the modern day and joined the Avengers. There was the one where he just got his powers at a young age, and then of course there was the one that would join the Exiles. Again, I don't hate Miguel, but the thing is, his identity as an alternate Spider-Man is just kind of secular, to the point where if there are any other versions of Miguel O'Hara, they're just Spider-Man 2099, but just ultimately shifted into a different setting. They all have the same starting point, and they all just went in different directions, with the exception of the one from Time Storm. But again, I'd still kind of call that into question, because he did end up eventually adopting the standard Miguel O'Hara costume that you would associate with Spider-Man 2099. So at the very least, it is kind of nice that we get more of a spin on Miguel O'Hara by having Patrick here essentially being a proxy to both him and Peter Parker. So again, I dig that. It's a small little thing, but I dig that, and I do at least like that, because for whatever reason in advertising for this book, they seem to think that the web slinger was George Stacy, and I don't know why, but I didn't care for that, especially considering how many ties to Peter Parker they had there. I just thought it would be lazy if they made him George Stacy as well. So I like the fact that they still kind of kept the Peter Parker connections while still connecting him to another already existing famous Spider-Person. So again, I dig that. But yeah, on the whole, the story itself is just a fun Western but it's just, oh yeah, the story itself is just a fun Western story that still remembers that it is ultimately a Spider-Man story, as it manages to mix the Western elements of the story with the sillier aspects of the superhero thing, and makes them kind of blend well. It manages to take advantage of some of the sillier factors to give us some more humorous moments, while also kind of mixing it in with some genuinely kick-ass moments, as we see the web slinger acting genuinely smart in battle, utilize his connection with his horse to take the Scorpion down, and ultimately working with Miles to ultimately beat the bad guys and save the day. So on the whole, issue 4 of this comic is just a fun time. Just a nice little laid back story with enough kick-ass action and gun-toting crime fighting that ultimately I think you can find yourself enjoying it. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you on Saturday as we see Miles Morales entering the world of Marvel Noir. Why is he going there? Well, we'll find out when we look at issue 5. So till then, I hope you have a good evening and take care.